Welcome to Desert Wanderers, produced by Salt and Light Radio. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. I will be interviewing priests, religious, and laity in our local Boise diocese, asking questions that'll help you navigate your vocation and help build community wherever you are with whatever resources you may have. Let's build the city of God together. Welcome, Kim. I'm so excited to have you on today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. So for anyone that doesn't know, Kim is going to be putting on the Sacred Sorrows event here in Boise with the founder, Rita Morton, this June. It's going to be June 6th at Our Lady of Ephesus, starting at 9:30 a.m. Mm-hmm. Right. And so today we're going to talk about your vocation story and then about the Sacred Sorrows event and what that is. So I guess the first thing to do would be to just go through your vocation story. So did you grow up Catholic? Were you not Christian? Can you give us a little bit more information?
Yes. So my mother was very devout Catholic. My dad was Catholic also, and I grew up going to church every Sunday. I was an altar girl. Excuse me. I was baptized. I did my first communion. I was confirmed and was very active in the church. I had a youth group that was really meaningful to me, good friends in my youth group. They were probably my best friends. And the church was a safe place for me as a kid. I grew up in an alcoholic home. And the church was a really safe place for me to go. It was kind of like a haven, you know. And then as I got older, I started drinking myself. And probably when I was 16, I started drinking more heavily. Prior to that, I was smoking pot. That was kind of the thing in the 70s when I grew up, is a lot of kids were smoking pot. It wasn't like today. It didn't have the potency that we find today. Yeah. You know, but that was how I started using drugs, was with the pot. But I quickly turned to alcohol. It was legal, and my dad drank, and I don't know, it just seemed acceptable. So that continued to just get worse and worse. When I went to college here at Boise State, I started drifting away from the church.
Was it mostly right after you left your parents' household, or
I continued? I wasn't going to church, but I still had the belief, and I still felt Catholic for a while. In fact, I've looked at some old letters that I wrote my mom when I first started college, and I was talking about sharing the faith with people. So I was evangelizing and I was like 18 years old, my first year in college. I was also drinking a lot, but they don't really go together, but I guess they did for me. And then my parents got divorced when I was 18. I was 17 when I went to college because I graduated young. And so the next year, my parents got divorced, and that was a shock. My mother got angry with the church. I won't get into the issues, but I got angry on her behalf, and I just stopped going. And there were other things too, like in college, I remember going to a talk on pro-choice versus pro-life, and the speaker was very persuasive. The pro-choice speaker was very persuasive. And I kind of got sidetracked by that.
Do you remember what the argument was?
Yes.
What was it?
I remember what he said to me that was like a turning point. He said, I was talking about the percentages of people who experience rape. And he said, what if it was you? And it really made me stop in my tracks and think about that. And I thought, what if it was me? What would I do? Well, I know today what I would do. And for me, I would always choose life. But at that point in my life as a young woman,
absolutely.
there's a lot of things I hadn't experienced yet,
I think sorry, we'll just take a quick detour here. I think a lot of times, or at least things I've heard recently when listening to different pro-choice, pro-life debates, is people talk about, I used to be pro-life until I had an unexpected pregnancy. You know what I mean?
Well, I had 2 unplanned pregnancies.
Yeah.
But both my children, I don't regret having my children.
Absolutely.
And my younger son asked me after Kieran died, my older son, he said, Mom, would you do it again, knowing what you know now? Oh. And that's such a loaded question, because he's thinking about himself and if he wants children. And I just had to say, I don't know at that point. But I did say, honey, you can't pick and choose the child you're given.
Yeah.
There's no guarantees in life. We don't have that kind of power to make that choice. So, but I did go back to him later, a couple years later, after I had come more to terms with my son's death. And I said, I've really thought about this and I would make the same choice. I would.
When it comes to, I would assume, putting myself in your shoes, having my children, is if I lost them, I would be devastated, but not to know them would be even worse. Mm-hmm. Like knowing that I know them and to not know them. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but. Well,
and I think where you are in early grief, when it's at its most intense, is so, especially with a loss that is outside the natural order of things.
Right.
Like the loss of a child.
Instead of like a loss of a parent, right?
Exactly. It's because it's unexpected and it's not supposed to be that way, right? And our job as parents is what? To make sure our children survive and thrive. And so that kind of a loss brings with it not only the physical yearning for your child, but all of the regrets that you have as a parent.
Yeah.
And the pain of what if I had done this and what if I had done that, and the mistakes, and having to acknowledge your own mistakes, come to terms with them. The Lord forgave me when I made the mistake.
Right.
He forgave me a long time ago, but I couldn't forgive myself for a long time.
Yeah.
So.
And unfortunately, this is something that Father Nelson Sintra talks about in his Generational Catholicism series, of talking about parents who have had children leave the faith. He says they're adults. At some point they're their own person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really hard in parenting, especially, to think that they're not just this thing, this. I say this because I can see it in my own parenting. Sometimes it's like, I just want you to do X. Just do X, right? Don't do Y, do X. And you forget that they have their own will, their own personality. They're in their own bubble. Like, they might be zeroed in on something, right? And just not even paying attention to you. And so you to get angry, right, over them doing Y instead of X. I think sometimes we forget that they're their own persons with their own conscience, with their own decisions. And although we can try to guide them as best we can, in the end, especially when they're adults, like, they make their own decisions and we can't control that. So I think he always talks about having a lot of grace for yourself in those moments, because again, you can do your best, but even your best, even people that parent perfectly or try to pass on the faith perfectly in his examples, in the end, it's not your choice, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There was one point where my son, he spent a year in the juvenile corrections facility for a drug-related crime, and they have a therapeutic treatment program in there. Mm-hmm. And so he was in that program for a year. He also had a pastor who was coming to visit him and teaching him about the Bible. And I have a journal that he wrote while he was in there.
Oh, beautiful.
I know, with these Bible quotes and what he wrote underneath. And I'm convinced that he had a genuine religious experience while he was in there. But as the way things go, when he got out of there, he, within a few months, had gone back to using again. But he wrote me a letter while he was there, and I found it not too long ago. I looked everywhere and I couldn't find it. And then one day when I needed it the most, I found this letter. And in the letter he says, you were the best mother for me.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know. I think about that a lot, that he really felt that way.
Yeah.
And whatever mistakes I made, he already forgave me. Yeah. So why can't I,
forgive? Yeah.
If he forgave me, I need to forgive myself. Yeah.
My sister-in-law, this is something I tell every new mom, because this was really impactful for me when I had my son. He was about 2 weeks old. He's my oldest. And I remember crying and thinking, I just can't do this. I'm not cut out for it.
It's so hard.
Because what would happen is my sister-in-law or my mom would come over and he'd stop crying.
Right.
And I'd be like, I'm a failure. I'm like, why can't I get him to stop crying? Yeah. Which I'm like 3 babies in now. I'm like, I got this. It's just experience, right?
Right.
But I always tell every new mom, I write it in my little notes when I give them their gifts and things, is my sister-in-law, she came over to me and said, or I don't know if she told me or she texted me after that, when she was later, but she's like, I just want you to know that out of all the people that God could have chosen to have this soul, right? Because we believe that it's like a soul is a person, right? That you were the perfect person to be this child's mother. Oh, and you have to remember in any times of doubt that God knows your weaknesses and God knows your strengths and knows that for you to get that child to heaven, you were the person that he entrusted with. And I think that's really helpful, especially because as mothers, I think we can be pretty hard on ourselves and our spouses, about our children, right? Because they're so, we can get into this later, but they're literally part of our DNA, right? So, but let's go back to your story for a second. So you're in college.
I'm in college. And
you said you still kind of were practicing, but not really.
Not really.
And then you had this, pro-life
experience. And the combination of that and my mother leaving the church, I'm not sure she had left right then, but she was angry with the church. And so that's just how it is. And if you're close to your mom and something happens, then she influences you, know, so it's not her fault, but I was already headed that direction.
Yeah.
And it kind of just put the nail in the coffin,
Which is pretty typical, I think, of most people. They go through a phase in college where you're just trying to figure things out as an individual.
You're questioning your faith, and then you're being presented with all of these new ideas, and it's exciting,
Even questioning your own identity. Yeah, like, who am I apart from my parents?
Exactly. Right? So anyway, I left, and I didn't return to the church until 5 years ago. Well, no, it was only 2.5 years ago.
Because you came back to Christ 5 years ago,
right? Yeah. Right. Well, I started to. Well, let me back up. So,
let's fill in the middle.
Fill in the middle. So, stop that. But I still would go to, throughout the years, I didn't go to Catholic church. I didn't go to Sunday church, Sunday Mass. But I would, whenever I was troubled, I would go to a monastery. And so the monastery in Jerome, Ascension Priory, I spent quite a bit of time there, and probably the years from when I was like 30 to 40. And then right after my divorce with my kid's father, I went to a retreat there about, I can't remember the name of it. It was like New Beginnings, Divorced and Widowed People or something like that. It's absolutely spectacular. But it was so soothing to my soul. And one time I took my kids out there, the boys.
Oh, you did?
And my son told me he wanted to be a monk. My older son, the one who died, he said, I want to be a monk. It's like, wow.
I have a question about that. So I want to get your opinion. I know a couple people that struggle with addiction and depression specifically.
Yeah.
And you know how we have these vocations, right?
Right.
We have the vocation of the priesthood, the vocation of religious life for sisters and brothers, and for married life, right?
Right.
I wonder how much of that is them desiring or wanting to be more focused, intentional with the spiritual life. Mm-hmm. And yet, that's not modeled, so they don't ever choose it. Like, sometimes people just don't know that religious life is an option. I didn't know that. really, well, actually I kind of did. Just my idea of what religious life was.
Yeah,
was
or what it
like,
means.
Yeah, or how it looked, or like I really wanted to work with kids, but there are so many religious orders that work with kids that I could have, right? I'm not saying that was my path, but.
Yeah. There's something inside of him that was that divine spark.
Do you think that you had that as well?
As a child?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I definitely did. I mean, definitely remember feeling close to God. I remember praying to Mother Mary.
Yeah.
And I remember in catechism class, the talks we had about values. And I mean, absolutely. And I went to these things called youth encounters, which were really beautiful. This is the 70s, so hence the youth encounter. They probably do the same thing now, but it's called something else.
Right.
But they were kind of like, they were encounter groups. You have these little small groups and you shared. They were like faith sharing groups, and people would write you love letters. Like they would collect love letters from all the people who knew you, and then they would be delivered to you at this retreat.
Oh, that's actually very sweet.
Oh, it was
right?
So beautiful.
Like grandparents and parents and friends. And
all kinds of people. And then they would just give you this packet of letters.
Oh, my goodness.
And you would read all these wonderful things about yourself. But at the same time, this was happening, and I was progressing in my alcoholism. And so I think my growth was stunted because of that. But it was there. The foundation was planted in me. Yeah. And so later, so I'm 40, going forward, I got divorced. Then I met, after a couple of years, I remarried my current husband, who's Jewish. But I was attending an Episcopal church at that time. And he started coming to church with me, just being supportive. But I started learning about Judaism. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't a religious Jew. He was more of a cultural Jew, secular Jew. But he still would go to services on holidays, Jewish holidays. And so I would go with him. So I was learning about the culture, and through his family, I would learn about the culture. And I thought Judaism was such a beautiful religion, and I was floundering around in Christianity, and I was kind of resentful at bad Christians, people who had said things to me that made me mad, or people who were hateful or were judgmental. And so I was sort of lumping Christians into this category, and I developed a prejudice against Christianity. And it just kind of gradually got worse. And so I stopped going to that church. I just kind of didn't want anything to do with organized religion. Mm-hmm. I believed in God. I'd been going to a 12-step program. I got sober when I was 22.
Okay.
And it was a beautiful thing, but it was very generic.
Like surface?
It was pretty surface, but it was all about action. It was like helping others.
Oh,
so my whole faith was centered around helping other alcoholics and addicts. And that's great. That's good work.
Yeah.
But I didn't grow spiritually. I didn't grow, enough. And so I reached my 50s, and I started going downhill emotionally. Mm-hmm. I needed to grow. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I wasn't asking for help. And eventually my current marriage, we started having problems. It was troubled. And in 2018, right before the pandemic, my husband and I went a little bit crazy, and he quit his job, and we took a trip around the world for a year. We went to like 25 countries, and every country we went to, we would visit holy sites. Even if it was like a Buddhist country, we would go to holy sites. And we went to Jordan, and we went to holy sites. And we were always looking for God, but we didn't know that's what we were looking for.
Do you feel like your husband also was looking for something spiritual?
Absolutely. We both were struggling with our faith.
Do you think that was why sometimes God puts like little flags, I guess, up to try to get your attention. I don't know if you've ever read, what is that book? Oh gosh, Tootle, the steam engine or something. Anyways, he's always like, wants to go frolic in the field, right? And because to get a 100% A plus in trains, you have to stay on the tracks always. That's the rule. And if you ever see a red flag, you have to stop. And so how they had this little engine stay on the tracks is everyone in town got these red flags, and every time he would turn away from the thing to go frolic in the meadow, there would be a red flag, and he's like, you know what, the meadow's not even fun, there's too many red flags. And then he learns to stay on the tracks or whatever. But anyway, so sometimes I feel like God puts up these little red flags to like try to get us back on track. Do you think that your marriage, the things that were coming up in your marriage were really just like, you guys both need me? Like, do you feel like that, looking back with your spouse, do you think you both would agree that that was part of what you were looking for?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we always loved each other, and we also always liked each other. We always got along. We were friends before we got married. But we did not have a strong enough connection with God to weather the problems in our life. Mm-hmm. And he had 2 children, I had 2 children. The blending of families is very difficult in the best circumstances, and we didn't have the best circumstances. And my stepkids were struggling. It was a very tumultuous time.
Well, I think we've talked prior to this. So you said you got sober at 22.
I've been sober 40 years.
Amazing.
Totally due to the power of God. I definitely didn't have the power to stop myself. So, amazing power of God. But recovery has been, I've been really blessed because I never relapsed, and plus getting sober at a young age. And that's one of the things I couldn't understand is like, why would God bring me to recovery at such a young age? And then my son never found recovery. I didn't understand that. And especially with him growing up, being exposed to recovery and knowing the genetic predisposition to this disease, I just couldn't understand that. Why did this happen? And I've asked that question over and over and over. Why? But that's the wrong question. Because there's no answer to some things, I'm not going to know the answer. There might be one that I don't know, but the right question is, who should I be focusing on? And that's the person of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that then, and you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So we came back from this trip, and we found the program it's called Alive Again Ministries, and they had a large group of people on Zoom during the pandemic, and which was perfect. And so we were going to all these Zoom meetings with these Christians, and this guy he would just make me so mad because he was always talking about Jesus all the time. And back then I referred to it as the J word. I wouldn't even say Jesus out loud. And then as time went along, all of a sudden I realized, like, why am I so mad about Jesus? Jesus didn't do anything.
Right.
I always loved Jesus, and I wanted to follow him too.
Did your husband, did he start to come to faith before you kind of softened to that?
He started to change is what happened for the better. He didn't acknowledge Jesus as his Lord and Savior until later. Mm-hmm. But he changed. He started doing housework, and he started doing laundry and just being nicer and kinder.
Why? Did you ever ask him about this? What happened? What changed?
Well, I think, we've talked about it. I mean, what changed is his exposure to these Christian men, because they had strong men's groups.
Oh.
And they're great. I mean,
were they vulnerable?
Yeah, the men are like, they're vulnerable. They help each other. They've got a very good network it's really pretty amazing for anybody who needs recovery. I highly recommend.
That's one thing I think our society, we are living in a therapy society, but therapy is, I'm not going to knock on therapy. Therapy is really good, but therapy is one-on-one. And I think one of the things we don't do in our society, and I think this tends to happen more on the male side than the female side, is being vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And showing our souls to other people, because I think we live in this social media age where it's like, I might go to therapy, but I'm not going to show you any of the bad stuff online, or at least that's how we grew up. Maybe that's changing now. Maybe we're starting to see a shift, because I think you can. I still think that there's still some hidden stuff, but I think vulnerability, especially among men, and being able to have a guy share another part of his life vulnerably to another guy, I think, because women do that to men all the time, and I think men are like, I have to protect you, or I have to control this situation and like make sure it doesn't get out of control. Yeah. You know, whereas like a guy, like man on man, like trying to talk about things that they're struggling with and kind of letting those walls down can actually be very healing.
Yeah, it was dramatic. The change in him was dramatic, and he's just continued more and more and more that way. I mean, I think I acknowledged that I was going to follow Jesus, you know, made a commitment probably 6 months before my son died. My husband was later. Oh, okay. And I don't know exactly when, but the changes in him made me interested in Christianity, because I was like, if they can change him like this, I want that too.
Yeah.
You know, so, but anyway, this guy, I don't want to say his name and violate his anonymity, but he was an amazing speaker, and he got through to me in a way, kind of like a 2x4 over the head in that way. He just confronted me one day, but he made me think, and he challenged my ideas, and he kind of got through that wall of prejudice, you know. And then there was a woman that was helping me also, and same thing. She was very confrontative, and, you know, it was good. It was good for me. Because I had too much, I was arrogant.
Really?
I had developed an arrogance over the years, like, you know, I was doing all this myself, you know, all this long-term sobriety and the things I had accomplished and blah, blah, blah. Well, it humbled me, because I was falling apart. My marriage was falling apart. My life was falling apart. I couldn't handle my grown kids. They were adults, but they were, you know, they were all experimenting with drugs and alcohol, and my mom was sick, and you know, it was just all these things, and I couldn't handle it. I didn't have the connection with God.
Yeah.
So I did at one point try to convert to Judaism. That didn't go anywhere. Thank goodness. I think the Lord was like, he slammed the door shut on that fast. And then I just realized this is the way I need to go. And then
Can I ask you a question on that?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you came back to Christianity before you came back to Catholicism.
Right.
And my question for you is, did you, when you were going to these holidays that your husband would still observe, when you came back to the Catholic faith, and I know we'll get there in a second, but was there any tie, like seeing the similarities and differences in the Mass? I mean, as a Catholic, I always wonder that, because, you know, we talk about there are these different practices that are taken from the Jewish tradition over to Catholicism. So did you see any of that?
I think he saw it more than I did.
Oh, really?
When he came, he didn't come to Mass with me until the Christmas, like not last Christmas, but the one before. He came to Mass. And that was the first time he'd ever been to a Catholic Mass. And he felt at home, and he said he'd never experienced peace like that.
Wow.
And I was completely shocked. I was like, what?
Did you think that he was going to be hesitant, or I guess
I thought he would like the service maybe, but I thought he was like really into the Protestant thing, you know, because he was with all these evangelical guys, but a lot of them were Catholic.
Really?
Yeah, there's a mix. There's like half Protestant, half Catholic.
Wow. And
so he talked to some Catholic guys in this group, and one of them said to him, he talked about having an orderly mind. And my husband was like, how do you get an orderly mind? And he talked about his Catholic faith. He said, this is how I do it.
Wow.
So my husband was intrigued, and then he came to Mass, and then he was like, I think I want this. Wow. So he did OCIA this year, and he's not there yet. He's got some final paperwork things he needs to do. But I'm pretty sure he's going to become Catholic.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And for me, it was the same. I was just, when I gave my life to Jesus, which was about 4 months after I decided to follow Jesus, but I didn't like give my life to him yet.
Right.
So then one day I just was like on my knees. I was like, felt desperate. And I was just like, Lord, take me, I'm giving you my life. Do whatever you want with it. And then 2 months later, my son was dead. And so it challenged my faith in so many ways. But I never lost, because when Jesus came into my heart, there was this warm sense of presence that came over me. I'm sure there's a lot of people that will relate to this, but that never went away.
Yeah.
That's never gone away. And every time I would start to doubt, I would remember that. And I would think, but he's here. He's in my heart. He has to be real.
Yeah.
But then that brought up all the questions of, do relationships end when a loved one dies? How could God allow this to happen? And why? How am I going to go on? How am I going to survive this?
Yeah. I would love to go in and have you just talk about your son and who he was and what light he was. So first, let's go ahead and do you want to talk about how your faith had that challenging point, how you came out of the questions of why would he take a relationship away? And
well, I'll just say quickly, because most of that is in my memoir.
Okay.
So I'll just quickly say monasteries played a role, and going back to Mass played a role, and a retreat that I went to at Sacred Sorrows played a role, and I took a pilgrimage to Alaska where my son died. He died in Dutch Harbor, Alaska, which is a commercial fishing port. He was a fisherman. Yeah. And I went there, and it's not easy to get there, but I was pretty determined. And I went there last summer, and I retraced his steps, and I spent 10 days there and just learned about him and his life.
Yeah.
And what it was like. Yeah.
So,
but I could talk about him. I'd love to talk about him.
Yeah. So tell us about him. What was he like?
So he was always...
First, I don't think we actually said his name yet.
Kieran. His name is Kieran.
Okay. So
tell us about Kieran. Kieran Sean is his name. He was kind of a wild kid. He was very adventurous. He would climb on things. One time he'd climbed on the refrigerator and got into trouble up there. He'd try to climb on the roof. He was looking for Santa, I think.
Wait, he was on the roof? How old was he?
He tried to climb the roof. He was probably like 3 or 4. I don't know. He was doing like a tightrope on the top of the swing set. He would climb on top of the shed in our backyard and jump into the swimming pool. And he'd get the other kids to do it too. So, and he liked to skateboard, and he was incredibly smart. He didn't do well in school because he had social problems, but he was incredibly smart. He took Arabic for a semester in college and got an A in Arabic.
What?
And
what?
He got an A in Arabic, an A in history, and then he got 2 Fs. I can't remember what the 2 Fs were in, but
I wonder if they weren't challenging enough.
That's probably true.
He is just needing more.
Yeah, and he was that way from very young. He was incredibly bored in school, and he was always in trouble. But he was so incredibly smart, and he could fix anything. He could look at a piece of equipment that he'd never seen before and take it apart and put it back together.
He was a tinkerer.
Yeah, he totally could fix anything, and he taught himself how to be a marine engineer.
What?
I mean, he had help. He had mentors and things, but he taught himself. He didn't go to school. He didn't take a certification course. He just learned it.
Is that what he did on the fishing boat?
Yeah, that's what he was doing. He was the chief engineer on a fishing tender.
Okay, so I have a question for. Do you have any advice for mothers with little boys who just need more? Because
I do.
It's sometimes it's just we had a podcast with Evelyn Bush, who's a Waldorf early education, and she said what she would do with those boys. She would buy hay bales And she's like, they would just have so much energy. These 3-year-olds would just have so much energy, and they needed to do something with it. So she would buy hay bales, and then she would buy like old electronics, like keyboards, mouse, like computers. And she would give them,
I wish my son had had that teacher.
Yeah, and that's what she would do. She would just set them down with the things and say, take it apart, put it back together. Or she would say, you two boys, you need to push the hay bale across the yard and back. And this is what she would do. She was an early education.
I love this teacher.
Yeah, so she was early education. She didn't get into school-age kids. So she stopped about 5 years old. But that was her suggestion. She's like, you have a little crazy boy. You need to be challenging him. But I have a hard time keeping him interested, where he's like, I'll play with this like once and then he'll do well taking it apart. It's not challenging enough, but there's a balance between something challenging enough and yet interesting still, right? There's a balance.
Yeah. I mean, my advice is similar to that, in that, I have a couple things. One is trust your instincts as a mother, which I did not do. And I wish, I have regrets about that. Like, I knew he wasn't doing well in school and I should have found a better program for him. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we could just put this one thing. But I think there's one thing to say about school and what we're learning after COVID is that not every school is created equal. Yeah. And that kids will, even if it's a good school, sometimes a kid needs something else, right? So I just think there should be a lot of flexibility in all of that. Yeah,
right?
Me too. But the other thing is physical. He needed a lot of physical exercise, and it calmed him down. It helped him deal with the this constant urge to be active.
Did he like sports?
Yeah. Well, he didn't really like team sports. We tried everything. We tried football. We tried soccer. We tried, we just tried everything. The only thing he really took to was karate, martial arts. And I found, and I didn't know that this was a Christian martial arts thing. This is one of Jesus's little breadcrumbs when I look back. But we found this guy, his name, I'm going to advertise him. His name is Joe Peel, and the name of the karate place is Keiju Binko Martial Arts, Defensive Arts. Keiju Binko Defensive Arts. I think that's what it's called.
And they do karate? Or?
Yeah, they do. It's a form of defensive karate. It's a form of karate. Cool. But the guy that runs it, Joe, was a Christian. And the first time I took my son there, they prayed, like they did prayer. And I was like, I thought this was like an Eastern thing or something, But they said this Christian prayer. But that was he didn't push it on me or the kids. He demonstrated it in his life. And he was very gifted with these troubled kids. Not all the kids were troubled, but some of them were. And he helped my son so much. My son was involved in that for like 8 years.
Wow.
He didn't consistently do very many other things, but he stuck with that for a long time.
Did he do tournaments and things?
He did tournaments. He didn't like tournaments because one time he hurt a guy and the guy was bleeding. Oh. And that kind of upset him, which surprised me. He was such a tough kid. I thought. Do
you think he was pretty tender, like sensitive underneath?
I think he was.
Skin? Under his like tough exterior.
Yeah, he had a tender heart. Like he would rescue. He had a blind cat, so he would rescue animals and and he was a ladies' man. Women really liked him. Mm-hmm. And he did fall in love. He had a fiance at the time that he died, and they were talking about marriage. And she was wonderful. She's a Scottish girl, and he met her while he was traveling. So he would fish half the year and then travel half the year. But he was just an amazing person, but he had this shadow side, this underground life with the addiction, and I didn't want to hide that at his memorial service, and so we did talk about that, but I tried to focus on his contributions to life. Yeah.
And so you said that he had struggled with addiction as well.
Mm-hmm.
And was he the only person in your family besides you and your husband, or did you have other kids, stepkids that had problems?
Our daughter, Livy, she is 29 now. She started using opiates. I think she was 14, 15. So she was an opiate addict also. But for parents out there who may be tearing their hair out, trying to figure out how to help their kid, I'd like to offer a little hope. And that is that she's been to rehab a bunch of times. And one of the last times she went, her roommate prayed for her. Her roommate was a Christian and prayed for her. And she had a Jesus experience. And she didn't get clean immediately. It's taken some time. But the thing about opiate addiction these days is these drugs are so powerful and so toxic, it takes a long time for people to recover. And so she's got almost a year now of sobriety and clean time. But it has been a long, tough road. And she's doing everything she can possibly do for recovery. But I think this added experience that she had with Jesus is what made the difference.
Yeah.
And she is I can't even believe people who knew her when she was using and then see her now, they can't even tell it's the same person.
Wow.
She's so different.
Can you tell me, can we go into this for a second? So with these experiences, why do you think it is that Christianity can help pull people out? What is it about Christianity, or what is it about Christ that helps people pull them out?
It's just the Holy Spirit.
You think so? It's just a cleansing, you think?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. I've experienced it, but I can't explain it because the Holy Spirit's not explainable. I mean, maybe a theologian could explain it, but not me. It's just the love and mercy of a gracious God, and
it sounds like with your daughter, as well as you and your spouse, though, it sounds like there was a little bit of, well, actually, I have a question for you. So with that, when you talk about his mercy, is it just that you hadn't observed it before, or what was it specifically? I just like to see, for someone that might be struggling with addiction, like I
think this is really common with alcoholics and drug addicts. I see it all the time. People don't believe they are loved by God. They hate themselves. And I believe the devil gets in there and tells you, you're a piece of crap, it's not worth living. You should hate yourself. Look at my son used to say stuff like that about himself.
How can a family member help with someone that sees that? Because I think identity comes so much into this conversation.
Yeah.
So trying to speak identity to that person, but how else?
I think there's a lot of ways that people can come to God and find that love. There's not like one way. Family members can find help in Al-Anon and other 12-step programs and Christian recovery. There's Catholics in Recovery. I wanted to share about this because it's amazing. I just found this like 6 months ago. But they have groups for families.
You said called Catholics in Recovery?
Catholics in Recovery. Yep, you can Google it. It'll come right up. There's a meeting list. It's all on Zoom. There's some local in-person meetings some places. There are not any here yet. But
can we do a rapid fire resource thing? Because then I'll link all of them in the bottom. So what have been the helpful resources for you and the ones that have helped others but maybe weren't a good fit for you?
In terms of recovery? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I mentioned Alive Again Ministries, Catholics in Recovery.
Al-Anon, right?
Al-Anon. And then there's all the other 12-step programs, AA, NA, Sex Addicts Anonymous. The Catholics in Recovery has lust addiction meetings. Wonderful. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because it's such a shrouded in shame and guilt, and so many men are struggling with this today.
If you are listening and you have that problem, listen to our 7 Deadly Sins Lust podcast with Father Nathan. He is fantastic. He offers a lot of resources on lust, and we talk about it in depth. Sorry, shameless plug.
No, it's great. I want to listen to it.
It was very good.
Sounds good. So yeah, but I think also what helped me was I did an Ignatian program, the spiritual exercises in everyday life And it was through a Seattle group called SEEL, Spiritual Exercises in Everyday Life, in Seattle. And that was a 9-month hybrid program, part in-person, part online. But so it's easy to do.
Right.
But it changed my, it just really made me feel the love of God. You know, it was the first time I ever really fully believed that I was loved, beloved, no matter what.
When did you go through the Ignatian program?
When?
Yeah.
Well, it was before I gave my life to Jesus. I know. It started the September before my son died, because halfway through the program, he died, and I don't even remember the rest of the program. I continued going, but I was like a zombie.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last time we talked, that it was like that first year is really hard.
Yeah.
Because everything's kind of a blur. And
all I can tell you is if you're going through grief like that, is it will get better. The time period in between sobbing uncontrollably for hours, the time period gets shorter, you cry less, and then the period in between grief episodes or grief bursts gets longer, and you become more able to function. I mean, I'm like in year 4, and I'm still not functioning well in some areas. So you got to be kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
And, just turn to the Lord, because that's what can help.
Can we talk about grief for a second?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then again, this is just going to be your experience, but so with grief, what do you think are there certain stages of grief? I think people hear about, like, if you're looking to help someone, like, there's these different stages. Is that helpful for someone grieving, or is it like...
It can be, but they're not in order. That's where I think people get maybe mixed up a little bit, is you may not experience all of them, and they may be completely out of order, and you may have one and it goes away and then it comes back. So it's very unpredictable, the course of grief. Yeah. And then what helps people is different too. Like, some people are really like it helped me to go to Mass. But then I met a mother who, she associated Mass with her child, because her child had always gone with her, and she couldn't go to Mass anymore. I don't know how it is now, but when I met her, she couldn't go because it was so painful.
Yeah.
So different things help different people. But I think one of the things that really is helpful is if you can find ways to be close to your child. Mm-hmm. So, and maybe you can't do this the first year. Like, so even that was like too painful for me. Like, I had to take all the family pictures down in my house. I couldn't even, otherwise I'd walk through the house and I'd just be crying all day. So I had to be able to cope and compartmentalize and to be able to function. So I made that choice. Some people are comforted by pictures, and so it just depends on the person.
What can someone do? Yeah, so what can someone do to help someone in grieving? What should their first step be?
Yeah. Well, if you reach out with a card or, a message, an email or a text message, or if you call someone, leave a message, really simple things like, I'm just thinking of you, or, I'm here if you need me, things like that. Don't say things like, this is God's plan, or everything happens for a reason. This is really not helpful to most people that are dealing with a profound loss like this.
Yeah. Do you think that it's helpful to reach out again and again?
Yes, because you can't respond. Like, I would get these messages and I would feel comforted, but I did not have the bandwidth to talk to people, to respond, to have any kind of social interaction with hardly anybody.
I saw this on social media once, but it was like this mom, and she was saying, she sent to her friend this text. She was like, so I know what it's like to have a new baby and how it's really hard to respond to things, and sometimes it might be overwhelming in many different aspects. She said, so I want you to know, if you ever text me a 1 or whatever, I know that, or if I say, hey, how are you doing? And you don't have the bandwidth to respond, right? Or you don't have the mental capacity to respond in a profound way, you can say, like 5, 10, 1, and he's like, and just give me a number, and then I know to come over. Like, if anything under a 5, then I'm coming over, and we're gonna help you with whatever. Do you think that that's something helpful, or do you think that would be overwhelming?
For me, I think it depends on the friend.
Yeah, if it was someone close.
If it's someone close, I think that could have been helpful.
Yeah.
I had this one couple that we hadn't been friends that long, maybe a year. But they would just call up and say, "Can we take you to dinner?" And I would be like, "I really can't talk very much." And they'd be like, "That's okay." And they would take us to dinner, and they wouldn't ask anything of me. They would just chatter about daily things, what they were doing. They didn't say, "How are you, Kim?" How like some people would be like, "How are you?" And it was always the same. "I'm terrible. How are you?" What do you say to that? So, but they would just be there. They were just there,
I guess for me, I'm like, I think so many people are kind of, well, and this is my head. So my aunt recently lost her husband, and I would talk to her and everything would be normal. We'd just be talking about normal things. And then at probably the wrong time of the conversation, towards the end of the conversation, she'll be like, how are you doing? Like, how are you really doing? And, she would give me something short, right? Which is okay. Mm-hmm. But do you think that that is helpful to actually let someone explain their emotions, or is it better just to leave it surface and they'll open up when it's time?
You were relying on your relationship with her. So it depends on the relationship. It can be. Okay. There is a series on the Sacred Sorrows website, sacredsorrows.org, that is called Gentle Gestures. And it's advice for family and friends in the event of someone losing a child. Yeah, I think that would be a good resource. The whole website is a pretty good resource. And also Redbird Ministries. They're a Catholic website also. And they have, on Hallow, there are some child loss meditations that I would listen to them in the middle of the night, wake up at 3 a.m, sobbing, I had a dream or something, and those were so comforting. And they do retreats for couples. I haven't tried them, so I can't speak to, how the quality of the retreats or anything. But they do couples, they do women's and men's retreats. The retreat I went to was with Sacred Sorrows, so I can just talk about that one.
So your son passes away, you have this grief. How long did it take for you to start to
live again?
Yeah, just move into the next step. You know what I mean? So
it was longer than a year. It was probably, I think it was after I went to the Sacred Sorrows retreat. So that was like right after the 2-year mark.
How did you find out about Sacred Sorrows?
I was just Googling resources for mothers who have lost children or something online, and it popped up.
Did you sign up immediately? Or
no, I wasn't ready the first time I saw it. I just thought, other mothers are going to be there and they're going to have emotions and I can't handle it. I was scared, And
that's a valid concern to
have. It is.
Especially as mothers, I think it's hard because you want to like protect your children's like emotionally, right? Like emotionally, you want to you kind of control the emotional atmosphere of your home. Mm-hmm. And I could see that being really overwhelming for someone to be like, I can't have my emotions because there's other people that would have emotions, and that would be overwhelming.
And my family's not, we don't express emotions really. We just aren't that kind of family. And so my grief is private, and I was very reserved, and I didn't want to have to talk about things I didn't want to talk about. And I didn't want to be crying uncontrollably. But what I discovered is Rita is a very skilled facilitator, and she has a lot of safety guidelines in place. And so you don't need to worry about it. If you decide to go to one of the retreats, it's gentle, and it's structured in such a way that there's not a lot of talking with other women, except in a control. It's not controlled, but it's a structured environment. And it's guided. So
a lot of security.
Yeah, there's a lot of security.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll go into Sacred Sorrows in a second, but So how long did it take you?
So that was about 2 years and 3 months or something like that, I think was what it was.
Okay.
When I came back from that, I received from the Lord energy.
Really?
And I can't explain that either. It just happened. And I came back, I wrote an article for the Idaho Register about that experience. And then I was like, okay, God, what next? And he was like, you're going to write this book. And so...
He put you on mission.
Yeah. And he gave me the energy to do it, and he gave me the resources to do it. And every time I got stuck, he showed me a way out of it. And I wrote that book in like a year, which is pretty fast for for writing a book. And now I'm getting to the point of trying to publish it, and he's giving me all the tools I need. I mean, they just are appearing in my path.
Like the gifts of the Holy Spirit, right? It's just like so beautiful.
Yeah. And so that's given me purpose over the last year. But I think I found a grief counselor, a Christian grief counselor. That was also really helpful. Probably a regular counselor is fine too for a lot of people. For me, I wanted a Christian counselor.
Yeah. Actually, no, I would actually, as someone that went to a counselor that wasn't Christian, sometimes I think for different issues, maybe with grief, it would be different.
Yeah.
But for personal development, I had a lot of like pushback when I went to one on like, well, why do you feel like you need to hold yourself to this standard kind of thing? So I just be careful. I would definitely recommend a Catholic therapist, but I get something is better than nothing. I'll say that. So if you can't find a Catholic therapist and you're going through grief, like something is going to be definitely better than nothing, right? So get the help that you need. But
there's also a website called it's Center for Transitions and Loss, Center for Grief and Loss, something like that. But they have a ton of grief resources on there, and some of them are very specific, like like understanding your grief after a suicide, understanding your grief after a homicide, understanding your grief after an overdose. So there's like
it goes into like different types of grief,
all different types too, not just child loss, all kinds of grief. And there's a meditation book, a daily meditation book. It's not religious, but it's very spiritual. So it's ecumenical and very spiritual, but it's very helpful for understanding what you're experiencing, the feelings, the stages, what's normal, when to seek help, stuff like that.
Did you feel like this this pushed you into others? Like you said that you weren't sharing, you were kind of more reserved. Did this experience make you open up to others more?
The Sacred Sorrows experience? You mean?
Just Sacred Sorrows or just the grief in general?
Oh, the grief in general.
Was it something that pushed you to help rely on others?
Well, my husband was an incredible support to me. He literally asked nothing of me. He took everything over in the household. Wow. Everything.
Wow.
And he's still doing a lot of it. And he says I'm his service project. His job is to be of service to me. I'm telling you.
Sweet.
Yeah. This is a dramatic difference than how it was like 5 years ago.
Wow.
So he has been amazing. I don't think I would have survived without him. I really don't.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. But no, I'm pretty reserved. I have a spot.
It could just be how God made you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's how I am. So I do talk to my sponsor, and I also see a Catholic counselor now. And
you're sharing your story in your memoir and on a podcast. So, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In different ways. I'm being more able to share about it now. Yeah.
So tell me, would you recommend someone have some time before they go to an event like Sacred Sorrows? Or do you think that it would be good?
I think it's individual. Probably at the 6-month mark, you could start thinking about it. Those first 6 months are pretty awful.
Yeah.
And you just really need to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
That's the best advice I have, is take care of yourself. Do what you need to do for yourself. Get the help you need. Just whatever you have to do to survive this. Yeah.
And then for anyone that is in Boise that is listening to this, or they're listening to it, what are some suggestions for the upcoming event? How do they sign up? Where do they find the information?
Yeah.
What to expect during the day itself?
The day will be very healing. It's the comfort of prayer on the journey of grief. There'll be a focus on prayer. We'll probably read some scripture. We'll probably do written reflections of some kind or journaling. Probably a little expressive art maybe. And we'll have sacraments available. I think we'll have Mass. Fathers are invited to come to the Mass. And you can sign up at sacredsorrows.org, and then you just click on the event, and you'll be able to sign up there. And if you need financial assistance, that's available. Includes breakfast and lunch.
And for anyone that might be, I don't know why, I just feel like this is how I would respond to it, but for anyone that might think, well, if I move on, then I'm forgetting a part of me or a part of that relationship with that child, what would you say, like in regards to the event, but also personally to that person?
Well, none of us wants to forget our children, and we need to make sure they're remembered in whatever way that we need to do that. And moving on, you will take them with you. Kieran comes with me everywhere I go. He's here right now with me. Yeah. So the relationship, it goes on, and you can't leave them behind, because they're alive in another dimension. So they're going to be with you no matter what.
So getting the help is important because they're going to be with you even if you're not experiencing grief as intensely. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I feel closer to my son today than I did when he was alive.
Yeah.
Because there was so much that went unsaid between us because of the addiction. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're able to say those things now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I talk to him,
Yeah.
Somehow I seem to talk to him in the car a lot. I can't explain that, but that's what seems to happen.
Can you, before we wrap up here, I remember you telling me this, and I thought it was so beautiful, about the DNA. Could you, how that was helpful for you?
Yeah. There's an article a friend sent me, and I apologize to the writer because I can't remember the author, but the title of the article is, you need a physician at your, you need a physicist at your funeral. And it explains that our child's cells are in our bodies, that we carry our child's cells with us in our brains and in our bodies. And that was so comforting to me, that not only is he with me in spirit, but he's with me physically in my body.
Yeah.
Yeah, just thought that was beautiful.
That is beautiful. Well, Kim, I'm so excited to have you be putting this event on. I think this is going to be a ministry, and I think it is, part of your mission now, that energy that you said. I think it is going to be, you've always had such a caring soul, right? You said, I know that we've talked about this and you touched on it a little bit, but you've done a lot of work in the recovery world.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that, I'm really glad that you're putting this on here in Boise for those to experience. I think it's going to be a very beautiful event, very healing event. And I just thank you for coming on and sharing your story and talking about Kieran. And I'm just so excited that we were able to have this moment.
Can I mention my upcoming memoir?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Just real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Just anyone who might be interested in the story, the complete story of that journey. The title of the book is Always and Everywhere, and my website is kimsteinberg.net. And so you can sign up to be on the book release list, and then when it's published, I'll let you know.
Wonderful. And I can put that down in the description as well once that comes out. Oh, I'll put your website down.
Okay.
I'll put your website in the description.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for you to have come on and share your story. And I definitely be one of the people that would love to read your book when it comes out, because I think it is going to be a beautiful memoir of your life and his life. So thank you so much.
And I'm grateful for you having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week and we launch them for you on Wednesdays. So make sure to tune in for next week's episode, and we'll see you then.